She heard me tell her brother. She knows she is to pay Hector and her rent. Bueno, she can start work tomorrow morning. Senor Alfred sniffed. She is thin as a snake. Can you fatten her up so she'll be strong enough to run a vacuum cleaner, Rodrigo? I'll try. Her brother is stuffing himself right now. Come on, girl. You're next to eat. Senor Rodrigo showed Lupita the small, yellow-painted house on the other side of the alley. That is where you will stay with your brother and Concha, one of the maids from the hotel. The other boy who operates my dishwasher lives there too. They're both Mexicans like yourself. When you and your brother are not working, try to stay inside the house unless you're with people who know some English. Do not call attention to yourself here. Sí, Señor Esposito. Gracias, gracias. Her heart singing with joy, Lupita said, I'm not hungry, so I'll go to the house if you don't mind. Suit yourself. Esposito turned toward the cafe. Lupita, alone at last, opened the door of the little house where she and Salvador were to live. They had work. The first week would go by fast, and when they had paid Senor Hector and the man who would forge the Social Security cards, and Senor Rodrigo for their beds, they would still have something to send to Mamá. The week after, there would be even more money. If she and Salvador were to stay inside the house, how could they spend their money? How quickly their luck had changed from bad to good. The yellow house was sparsely furnished, but to Lupita it seemed very fine. Each of the 2 bedrooms contained 2 single beds, a chair, a chest of drawers, and a clothes closet. There was a tiny bathroom and a little living room, too, with 4 chairs, a table with a plastic cloth, and a transistor radio. The beautiful draperies were of paper, printed with big, red poinsettia blooms. Concha, a thin woman older than Mamá, was friendly and full of advice. She told Lupita at once, You have just come to this country and know nothing as yet. I have a warning for you. Sometimes the gringos who stay in the motel try to talk with the maids. If one does speak to you, smile and get away as fast as you can. Point to a room down the hall to make him think you are too busy to talk. Do not let him know that you are from Mexico and cannot speak English, or he may call La Migra to come and get you. What would a gringo tell La Migra about me? Concha laughed. Who knows what a gringo will do? They are very strange. Work hard and do not talk to anyone, not even to me. Senor Alfred does not like his maids to stand around talking to one another. Sí, Lupita nodded. Senor Aguilar had not liked that either. She looked across the living room at Salvador, who was talking with Valentin. They must be talking about the dishwasher. Valentin was making motions with his hands, as if he was using machinery. Lupita looked away from them to the poinsettias on the draperies as she relaxed in her chair. Bueno, Concha would teach her, and Valentin would help Salvador. How lucky they were to find work so soon, and friendly Mexicans to help them. The next morning, after a stand-up breakfast in the cafe, Lupita started her job as a chambermaid. The work was similar to what Mamá did in Ensenada, but Lupita found it very hard. There, she had helped out now and then, but now she had 15 bedrooms on the second floor of the motel to clean by herself. Floors to vacuum, bathrooms to scour, furniture to dust, and 25 beds to change. 16 were single beds, but the other 9 were very large. So large that Lupita had to keep circling them and lifting the great mattress to tuck in the sheets and blankets. By midday, her arms ached, and she could hardly push the vacuum over the thick rugs. After that heavy work, cleaning the toilets and putting up fresh towels seemed restful. Halfway through the afternoon, Senor Alfred came up to the outside stairs to check Lupita's work. He asked her what rooms she had finished, and then he unlocked their doors and went inside. She waited, worried, on the veranda overlooking the street. Would her work be good enough? Was she too weak to suit him? When he came out of the last room, he nodded at her and went down the steps to the lobby. He was satisfied. Lupita let out her breath and went back to work. By 6 o'clock she was exhausted, almost too weary to talk with Salvador, who came to sit beside her in Senor Rodrigo's kitchen and eat a dinner of enchiladas, beans, and rice. How did it go? Did you have any trouble? He asked. No, but it is hard. Some of the beds are very big. See, the work here is hard. Salvador mopped his forehead with his arm. The water in the dishwasher is very hot. If I am not careful, I can get scalded. How much food these gringos leave on their plates. I wish we had it in Tijuana, he smiled. but I like the dishwashing machine. It is interesting. Bueno, Salvador. Lupita was too tired to say more. Lupita, I have talked with Valentine while we work. Lupita's interest rose. Senor Rodrigo does not care if you talk and work at the same time? No, not as long as we get the dishes washed. Valentine has told me how to send money down to Mexico. He knows all of the ways. Lupita finished her food, being careful not to get a stain on her white uniform. What are they? He says I can take our money to a bank here, open an account, and send Mama a piece of paper called a check. She can take it to the bank in Ensenada and get pesos for it. Go to a gringo bank? Trust Yankee strangers? Lupita shook her head fearfully. Salvador nodded in agreement. Another way is to go to the post office and buy a money order to send to Mama. One of the pocho cooks, the fat one over there. Salvador jerked his thumb toward the kitchen, and Lupita saw a heavy-set middle-aged man behind the counter. Is a good man. He told Valentine he would get us the money orders. But that is not the way Valentine sends money to his family in Mexicali. How does he do it? He writes a letter and puts cash into the envelope. Then he seals it, registers it at the post office, and mails it. Lupita's eyes grew wide as she leaned over the table to speak softly. Salvador, someone could steal the money. Not if the letter is registered. Valentine's always reaches his family. They write and tell him so. Concha takes his letters and registers them. She speaks English well enough for that, he says. Lupita's teeth sunk into her lower lip. See, this would be the safest way. Less danger of being caught by La Migra. After a moment, she nodded. When we are paid, I will write Mama a letter, and we will include what money we can. I will tell her that we will send more in the next letter. Salvador grinned as he began to eat his third tortilla. What will you write to her? Lupita stared gravely at him, then looked about her at the busy, noisy kitchen. I will not write her of the money we must pay for cards in order to work here. I will not tell her how we were robbed in Mexico, or about the coyote, or about the man who was murdered. I won't tell her how hard it was for us in Tijuana. That would make her sad. I will tell her how we crossed over covered up with vegetables. That will make her laugh. And Uncle Antonio, too. I will not tell her about giving up Papa's cross or Dortea's knife, but I will tell her that we have good paying jobs here and that we will go to Indio as soon as we can. I'll tell her that we will stay in Colton until we have learned the English we need to take a bus, and I'll promise to write to Aunt Consuelo and tell her where we are so she won't be worried about us. Salvador nodded approvingly. Bueno, that will do. But when we are paid the first time, we must also buy some new clothing. We have only rags. See, I know. I need to buy a dress so I can go to Mass. Concha told me last night that there is a church here that pochos go to. They speak Spanish there. She said if I had a dress, I could go with her. Clothing costs much here in the United States, but I will buy the cheapest dress I can find. Salvador's look soured. He did not like the idea of buying a cheap shirt. He liked handsome things, things that had luster and color. But Lupita knew he would be careful of the price. Salvador, where will we buy our clothes? Valentine knows a store where they speak Spanish. He will take me there. It probably sells dresses for girls, too. Get Concha to take you the day she registers our first letter to Mama. See, I will ask Concha. Lupita's first week in Colton was spent working, eating in Senor Rodrigo's cafe, listening to music on the little radio, and sleeping in a room with Concha. 2 gringos in the motel tried to talk with her, but she found Concha's advice worked very well. Neither gringo followed her when she hurried down the hallway and into an empty room. During that week, Lupita also learned that Concha was not always so agreeable. Sometimes, after work, she was cross and snappish, complaining that her feet hurt. Sometimes she came back to the little house to lie down before she went over to the cafe to eat. At those times, Lupita left her alone. She and Salvador would need Concha's help and goodwill. On Friday morning, Salvador and Lupita received their wages. Though what they owed for the forged card and a week's room and board had been subtracted, there was still money left over, enough to buy a shirt and dress and send some to Mama. That Friday morning, Concha was in a better mood, and she promised she would cross the street to the post office on her afternoon break and mail Lupita's letter. At noon, Lupita got the letter she had written, nervously put it in the cash she and Salvador had agreed to send, sealed it, and handed it to Concha along with $4 for the registration. The next day, after lunch, Concha took Lupita to a discount store close to the motel and helped her pick out her dress. It was made of dark blue cotton, had a belt, and the cloth was so heavy that Lupita did not need to buy a petticoat. Neither Lupita nor Concha had work on Sundays, so they went to Mass at the small white Pocho church. There, Lupita found nothing to make her uncomfortable. The priest spoke in Spanish, and she was able to light a candle at the altar for Papa's soul, and she was certain Mamma was doing this morning an enseñada. As they left the church, Concha asked Lupita, "Did you pray for your family?" "Si, for Mamma and my brothers and sisters." "And for Salvador and for yourself?" "No, I forgot to do that." Lupita stopped on the church steps. "But I gave thanks for coming here safely to Colton." "You should have prayed for yourself. Take care, Lupita. Take care not to anger Señor Alfred or Señor Rodrigo. Do not make them displeased." As they left the steps, Concha went on. "They can call La Migra whenever they want to." "Why would they do that, Señorita Concha?" Concha's eyes bored into Lupita's. "Because some other Mexican might come along willing to work for less money than you or Salvador. Perhaps they will like some other girl's looks better. To get rid of you, all they have to do is call La Migra and say they have just learned that you are not a pocha, but a wetback." Lupita's hand went to her mouth in terror. "I am always afraid," Concha continued. "Day and night I am afraid. Do not be bold. Pray for yourselves and be careful." "Si, I will be careful." Then Lupita asked to change the subject. "Where did you learn the English you know?" "From the chambermaid who was here before you. She went back to her family in Mexico." "You did not learn it from a book, then?" "No, no." Concha looked astonished. "Should I learn some English, too?" "A little would help you, I think. When I have time, I will teach you the words I know." "Gracias. Perhaps someday I will buy a book that is in Spanish and English, too." "No," Concha advised. "You would have to go to a bookstore, and the person there would surely know that you are Mexican and call La Migra." "Again, La Migra. Always La Migra. It must be everywhere." Yet Lupita could not believe that anything terrible would happen in Colton. From what she had seen, the small gringo city was a pretty one, even if it had no blue ocean bay like Ensenada. Instead, it was ringed with sharp-peaked mountains that changed from blue to brown to violet at different times of day. The houses were constructed of wood, and they were painted white, yellow, green, and tan, instead of pink, blue, and lavender, like the houses in Tijuana and Ensenada. Concha had told her that the only one family lived in each house. How rich these gringos were! Yet there were some things that Lupita missed. No trumpet and guitar music could be heard on the streets. See, there was Latin music in Señor Rodrigo's cafe, but it was so soft she had to strain her ears to hear it. Concha said that was how the gringos liked their music, almost inaudible, as if their ears were very tender. There were no people selling things on the streets either. All of the buying and selling went on indoors. These gringos did not smile at one another or stop to chat. They seemed to go about their business as quickly and seriously as possible. Even eating in Señor Rodrigo's cafe, which should have been a great pleasure, was speedily done. See, Concha was correct in saying the gringos were very strange indeed. The next week, Lupita struck up an acquaintance with Linda, one of the pocha waitresses in the cafe. They often talked while Lupita was eating in the kitchen. On Wednesday, Linda took Lupita to the shoe store next door and helped her buy a much-needed pair of white shoes with sturdy crepe soles. She later agreed with the complaining Lupita that the shoes had cost far too much money. Lupita admired Linda's pretty face, her red fingernails, her golden hoop earrings, and the scent of perfume that always surrounded her. Clearly she was a favorite of Señor Rodrigo. He always had a smile for her, even when he had none for anyone else. The pocho cooks told Salvador that Linda made more money in tips than any of the other waitresses, because she was the most popular. As Lupita watched her admiringly, she thought that being a waitress must be a very good job. She would like to be able to do that work herself, but even in a Mexican restaurant, a waitress must know English. Almost all of the customers would be gringos. How lucky Linda was to be a pocha and know English as well as Spanish. That Friday evening, Lupita was just starting to eat her supper when Linda burst suddenly into the kitchen, waving her hands in the air. She ran over to Lupita and whispered into her ear, "La Migra is here. They have come to raid for Mexicans. Get away! Hurry!" Then she whirled about and rushed back through the swinging doors. La Migra, in the dining room, on the other side of the door.